Spent a lot of time talking about Lance Armstrong. He was stripped of his Olympic medal and 7 Tour de France titles. The governing body is USADA, and their CEO is Travis Tygart, who made that decision, and he joins us now. Why the decision now, Travis?
Well, the evidence that we received over the last few months was just overwhelming. Unfortunately, that Lance Armstrong and the other participants on the U.S. Postal Service doping or pro cycling team participated in, a very professionalized and sophisticated doping program, all aimed to win. So, we're really under our rules and our obligation on behalf of clean athletes and all athletes at every level who want to compete without having to use dangerous performance-enhancing drugs. We had an obligation to initiate the process and allow the legal process to ensue, and at the end of the day, allow independent judges to ultimately make the decision whether that evidence proved doping or not. And yesterday, Lance Armstrong chose not to contest that, so that's now him and 2 doctors who have received lifetime bans for their participation in that doping conspiracy.
2 of his doctors?
Yeah, 2 of the doctors affiliated with the team, Michele Ferrari and then Dr. Del Moral, last month, were also banned for life for their participation as well in the U.S. Postal pro cycling team doping conspiracy.
If Lance had decided to continue to fight this, what would you have done?
We frankly would have welcomed that opportunity. It's every athlete's right within our system, and we would have had an open legal process where every piece of evidence, bit by bit, piece by piece, would have been presented in open court through the arbitration process, and he and his lawyers would have had the opportunity to cross-examine it, to confront it, to argue that it wasn't reliable or it didn't prove what we believed and are confident that it proved.
Was he afraid?
And ultimately, the judges would have made the decision about that or not USADA, but the independent judges.
But do you think that he was afraid of getting in front of a court, being cross-examined?
It's hard to say, but I think at the end of the day, yeah. I mean, the better move now for him is to walk away on these terms and hold on to a soundbite with no basis about an unfair process or a witch hunt or a personal vendetta and all these things that you've heard. Because I think it would have been much tougher had all of that evidence over a 2-week, 3-week period of time under oath been presented on the stand. So we will be providing a reasoned decision based on that evidence to the International Federation and the World Anti-Doping Agency. So I think in the weeks to come, that will be revealed in paper form. Obviously, not live testimony, given that he chose not to contest it.
The evidence will be made available.
Yeah, we will provide a reasoned decision and provide the evidence in order to support the conclusion that we drew, even though again he chose not to contest that evidence and walked away from it. So it will all be presented through the appeal process to WADA and the International Federation.
You respect Lance Armstrong?
I think there was a bad culture in the sport, and we really saw the win at all cost culture take over. So I think he did what a lot of other athletes did at that time. A number of them, when we confronted them with all the evidence we saw, came forward and were truthful and sat down with us and said, yeah, here's everything that went on, and here's how we did it, and here's who was involved, and here's how they taught us to beat the tests, and they helped, and they felt bad about what they were put into and the decisions that they were forced to make. So I don't think was really any different than those people, but he chose to go an entirely different route, and unfortunately, this is the conclusion at this stage, at least, that results from it. But I don't fault any athlete for succumbing or being tempted to the pressures. I think it says a lot about you what happens when the truth is finally obtained and how you react to it. But whether it's Marion Jones, who accused us of kangaroo courts and personal vendettas, I'd rather that hate and that venom and that anger be directed at us, because that's our job, and not at other athletes who are currently in the sport or other coaches who are currently in the sport who are trying to keep it clean. You know, we're here as an independent agency to protect the rights of those that want to do it clean and ethically by the rules that are in place and who don't want to subject themselves to having to use dangerous performance-enhancing drugs just to win.
He's Travis.
And want to live a real, authentic life and not one that has a deep, dark secret that no one's willing to acknowledge.
He's Travis Tygart, the CEO of USADA, the man responsible for stripping Lance Armstrong of his 7 Tour de France titles, his Olympic medal. How do you respond when Lance says he passed close to 500 drug tests?
Yeah, I mean, look, we've asked to see the proof of that. I'm not sure that's accurate, but look, at the end of the day, we know athletes, and Marion Jones made the same claim.
But has he ever failed a drug test?
Well, there were the 99 Tour de France samples that were retested. There was the 2001 evidence that we have that there was a suspicious indicative of EPO use that didn't go forward. There was the 99 glucocorticosteroid, and we have evidence of cover-up of that positive. And then we included the analytical data from 09 and 10 that, as in our charge letter, clearly indicates manipulation of his blood at that time. And that is corroborated by other evidence that we have.
But how do you beat the test, though, Travis? With these teammates who came forward, what was their system that allowed them to dope and get away with it?
Well, one was they would use plasma expanders. They would use saline expanders, so they would have notice of the test, or they would delay being tested. And then they would use substances that would easily mask the things that they were doing. They also were using things like blood transfusions, and all this is set forth in the charges that we've levied in our letter. But blood transfusions, which unfortunately there's not a current test for. There's good indications that can be drawn from that data I just mentioned to you, the 09 and 10 blood data that we have and presented to him in this case.
But how systematic was this, though, Travis? Along the way in the Tour de France, how are they cheating along the way? How, each stage? How many stages?
Yeah, I mean, by various methods. I mean, it was in training periods using testosterone, glucocorticosteroids, insulin to maintain the ability to train at longer hours, and thus, put on, if you can train longer and recover faster, that's obviously come game day or race day, that's going to give you a huge performance enhancing advantage. But also the evidence was clear. They would take out blood and store it, and then during key stages of the Tour de France, for example, or other races, that blood would be brought back to them and reinserted, so they would pack additional red blood cells into their body to give them a huge advantage when they were going into particular stages of various races.
Do you think most riders used during that time?
At that time, I think I think not unlike baseball, Dan, in the late '90s and the early 2000s, the culture of drug use overtook the rules, and I think a lot like Senator Mitchell, we got handed a really bad, terrible set of facts, and we had an obligation to weed through those facts and appropriately and responsibly piece those facts together and come to conclusions. And our number one objective, and this was told to every athlete that we spoke to, including Lance Armstrong, is to ensure that the doctors, the sport director that is still in the sport, are no longer allowed to continue advising young athletes and grooming young athletes to do what we have seen this U.S. Postal Service team do. I mean, this is like, the New York Yankees hiring Joe Torre to then go out and hire doctors, all to dope athletes in order to win world championships. And it's the most sophisticated program of that we've ever seen, all designed to win and all designed to ensure that they never got caught. And so we got handed all these facts, and we said, look, our objective has to be to get rid of the doctors and those in the sports system. The athletes, they were to a certain extent pawns in this bigger game. And so we're gonna give every athlete, including Lance Armstrong, the opportunity to come in and be truthful and be part of the solution going forward. Help young athletes coming into this sport not have to make the choices that those athletes were forced to make because the system and the culture forced them to make those decisions.
Here's a big question, though, Travis. I have to. I think Lance cheated. Okay, I've said that on this show, but I also wonder about the drug testing of USADA. If Lance did pass all of these tests, now you have tests, but they're sort of spotty for a guy who cheated all the time, apparently, and was systematic in it. I do have to raise questions about the actual drug testing policy that you have there.
Look, the testing's not perfect. I mean, we don't have and look, I wish I didn't have to say that. I wish I had a test that I could test you one time and would predict if you're ever going to.
But you know what you're testing for, though, Travis. That's what I don't understand. You know what these guys are taking, but the drug test didn't show up dirty.
There's no test, Dan, for blood transfusions.
But there is for EPO.
We know they were doing that, and we have no test for it.
But is that illegal?
Yes, absolutely.
To get a blood transfusion,
EPO, there's not an effective test to. You can mask the use of EPO, and you can use EPO in small doses, and at times when you think you won't be tested, and it'll be out of your system, but you will still get the performance advantage when you show up. Like that's the stark reality of drug testing. Unfortunately, it's very, very limited, and it's why it's critically important for anti-doping agencies and sport authorities that handle these cases to have the ability to bring cases based on reliable evidence and have independent judges. This is not my decision. This isn't the evidence that was presented that he chose to walk away from. He had a full legal right that a federal judge down in his hometown of Austin, Texas, said, well, you're legal. The authority is the USADA process. It provides you constitutional due process. You should go there and fight these charges. And if they're as false as you say they are, you'll win. And if for some reason, and look at the judge's decision, if for some reason they don't follow their rules or they don't provide you the legal process that they're required to, come back to me and we'll correct it.
How do you think it'd go if you saw Lance Armstrong?
What's that?
If you saw Lance Armstrong, would there be conversation?
Yeah, look, people have tried to paint us as, and me personally. I mean, obviously there was a lot of anger in the statement that was sent, but it's never been personal. In fact, I was one of his biggest fans, and I told him that several years ago, and I talked to him, and I also said, don't disappoint us. Unfortunately, I'm just as disappointed when I saw the evidence. And on days here, I'm sorry to have the position that I have, but because it's not easy and it's not, you have to make tough decisions. You have to sometimes make unpopular decisions. You have to make decisions that crush people to a certain extent because of the passion and the emotion we put in our sporting heroes. But that said, the next generation of athletes is looking to us, and we've got an overwhelming number of emails and phone calls from supportive athletes, current ones, retired ones, and young ones coming into all sports saying thank you. I'm glad that there's an entity that is willing to not let the culture of drug use and the win at all costs and trampling your competitors' rights take over a sport, and that we have confidence that you're there, you're going to be fair, and that we can rely on you to keep our sports clean.
What did he say when you said don't disappoint us?
It was, we won't.
Travis, I appreciate you coming on. I know that took a little bit of work to get you to come on, and I know that you've probably been inundated by a lot of people for requests. But thank you for the information, the backdrop on this as well.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate the opportunity.
All right, Travis Tygart, the USADA CEO, the man who made the decision to strip Lance Armstrong.